Hello and welcome to Access Matters. My name is Rebecca Potts and I head up the Access Matters initiative for Furlough, Responsors and Pulsar. We launched Access Matters back in July to encourage listening, sharing of experience, learning from best practice and collaboration on the actions that will have the greatest positive impact for our industry. Today we're joined by the wonderful Melissa Lawrence, Chief Exec of the Taylor Bennett Foundation. Good morning, Melissa.
Morning.
Melissa will tell us her story covering her experience working for a social mobility charity and the positive stories and challenges she's faced since joining the Taylor Bennett Foundation. Before I hand over to Melissa, I'd like to remind everyone that we are encouraging engagement, so please do submit questions using the Q&A tab on your screen or in the chat for all to see. Melissa will try and answer as many as she can. And please feel free to join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag #AccessMatters. As with our previous sessions, we're running a poll asking, have you ever felt discriminated against in the workplace? It's anonymous and we'd love for you to take part so we can take a quick look at the results later. But for now, it's over to you, Melissa.
Great, thank you very much. So as you heard, my name's Melissa Lawrence and I am the Chief Executive of the Taylor Bennett Foundation, which is a charity that exists to encourage Black, Asian and minority ethnic people, so BAME people, to pursue a career in PR and communications. I've been in post nearly 2 years now. December coming up will be 2 years and it has flown by. I've always worked in the charity sector, actually 20 plus years now, and I've always had a strong interest in employment, training, diversity, inclusion and youth engagement. And this has been very evident throughout my career. So I first started out working on estates in Hackney with local residents to basically help them support them with the what next in their lives. So if they were thinking about going on to higher education, entry-level employment, or looking to make a career change, then that's what I would advise them on. So I'm a qualified information advice and guidance practitioner, although I did that qualification a long time ago, and I think things may have moved on a bit since then. So the biggest part of my career so far has been working for a social mobility charity. It's based in the City of London, and I worked there for nearly 17 years. This popped up, hold on. That poll has popped up. So the biggest part of my career, as I said, was working for a social mobility charity. The aim of that charity was to work with disadvantaged young Londoners from sort of primary to secondary school level, and the aim was to introduce them to careers within the financial and professional services sector. So I worked with lots of corporates, from investment banks, law firms, insurance firms, to essentially help them to attract, develop and retain young people from, as I mentioned, disadvantaged backgrounds and boroughs. When I left that charity, I was the head of programme and my role was centred around 3 objectives. So it was to have strategic oversight over all of the charity's education and talent development programs and to manage a small team. I was part of the senior management team working with the CEO and the trustees to drive the charity forward, and I was also in charge of income generation. So I worked with corporates to develop or augment programs that drove diversity and social mobility within their business. So some of the biggest clients that I managed were the City of London Corporation, Lloyds of London, Bank of England, EY, UBS, to name a few. The final, quick fact about me is I do not have a PR or comms background at all. So since starting working in the industry, it's been a very steep learning curve for me. I just cannot stress that enough. But I'm really enjoying working in the PR industry, even with some of the challenges that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. So in terms of the foundation, I mentioned earlier on, we are a charity. We were set up in 2008 by Taylor Bennett, who are an executive search firm. And I mentioned before that, our focus is to address the need for greater ethnic diversity within PR because it is woefully low. In 2008, when we were founded, the BAME PR population sat at 6.3%. And that's according to the CIPR's annual census, which goes back all those years. Today in 2020, the BAME PR population sits at 9%. So that's still, as I said, woefully low. I don't need to do the maths to tell you what the industry sort of looks like right now. So in terms of what we do to address the need for greater diversity, ultimately it's two-pronged. So on the candidate side, we introduce and encourage people from a BAME background to consider a career in communications, because there are multiple reasons as to why they do not. There isn't a, this is it, and there's a light bulb moment to say, oh yes, let's fix that, and everyone will join. It could be parental, peer or teacher pressure to go into what's deemed the professional careers. I am holding up my fingers and doing the air quotes. Sometimes PR is not considered a professional career in the same way that engineering, accountancy, law, etc. is. It could be the lack of professional networks. I do know that lots of young people that we work with do not know people that work in the industry. It could be a lack of knowledge about the myriad of careers that they could go into. There are many different sectors and disciplines that operate within PR, and I find sometimes that the young people we engage with know very little to nothing. They might know about fashion PR or working with influencers, or they might know about public affairs and corporate comms. But as I said, it's so much more broader than that. And sometimes they don't know where to look for the roles. And it could be that not seeing people like them in senior leadership positions can be an issue. So as I said, there are a myriad of reasons. On the employer side, we work with agencies and in-house comms teams to support them with diversifying their workforce through our programs. I do want to say there is not a supply issue. This is not a broad brush comment, but sometimes employers just don't put much effort into diversity recruitment. They do not always look in the right places or engage with diversity organisations. Sometimes there is a lack of openness and transparency about where they advertise their vacancies. I think there is still a big part of this industry who rely on networks to share their vacancies. There is I've got this role, do you have someone in mind? And so what the foundation wants to do is kind of level the playing field in that way. So all of our programs are designed to create a talent pipeline into the industry. We are really good at this, but we know that we are not perfect, and we know that there is much more to do to support retention and progression in the industry, which has definitely raised its head a lot, not just this year, but in the last few years. So we have 3 core programs that young people and employers can engage in. The first is our PR training program. It's the thing that we have always done from the very beginning. It's our flagship program, and it's a 10-week paid full-time course in PR and communications. And generally every year we run 3 of these programs for 6 graduates at a time. It's not very big. But the goal of the program is to equip the trainees with the skills, the knowledge, the insights to enable them to pursue a career in the industry. It's a very tough 10 weeks and includes a day's training with the sponsoring agency, weekly presentations, employability skills training with the foundation, English tuition, career coaching, training with the CIPR and the PRCA, writing a weekly blog, conducting weekly newspaper summary reviews, and numerous masterclasses with agencies and in-house comms teams. So as I said, it's really tough. It's very robust. Sometimes we have some stresses with people trying to juggle all the different things that they have to do. But that's not uncommon working in PR, and we do what we say on the tin. So those trainees will leave the foundation with, as I said, the insights and skills to enter the industry. On average, 97% of the graduates who complete the training program do go on into employment, and last year 100% went into employment. So as I said, although it's very tough, we get results. The second program is our PR mentoring program, and this is for 6 months, and it's for young people post 18 through to, alumni of ours who have been working for a few years. And this involves PR practitioners sharing their insights into how the industry operates. The 3 objectives for our mentees tend to be focused on building their knowledge and insight, building their professional networks, and the mentors will then help them with the what next. So if it's a young person that hasn't really had any practical experience of working in the industry, it might be to help them secure a paid internship. If it's a graduate, it might be to help them secure a job. And if it's maybe an alumni that's been working for 2 or 3 years, it might be to help them with career progression. So very practical and tangible, with a very clear sort of start, middle and end. And it isn't just one-sided. The mentors who take part in the program will receive reverse mentoring from the more experienced mentees. And this is a really great way to build, I guess, awareness of the barriers faced by people from an ethnic minority background. There is a very good opportunity to learn from their experience, and it's definitely a career development opportunity. And then our final program is our Summer Stars internship program, and that launched in 2018. And that's where the foundation facilitates internships by recruiting the young people who then apply for the internships that we secure. Again, this is another fantastic talent pipeline into the industry. If employers find good interns, they will keep in touch with them. They will offer them continuous employment throughout university, whether that's at Easter or Christmas. And when the interns graduate, they are a really strong proposition for an employer. And we have definitely had successes last year and this year, which is pretty amazing considering it's been a crazy topsy-turvy world, which I will talk about in a little while. And I guess the other unique thing about our internship program is that it kicks off with a 3-day intensive boot camp, which is usually run in a university setting. So the idea is that we are giving all of the interns a good opportunity to build their knowledge and insight before heading out on their internships. And then I guess the final way that employers support us is by providing in-kind support, advertising their opportunities with us. We have an ever-growing database of keen, motivated people who are interested in finding out more about the industry, or they're ready to work here. I mentioned earlier on that there is not a supply issue for BAME talent. We are always oversubscribed with our programs, and this year we had over 200 young people apply for the Summer Stars internship program. For our autumn and summer PR training program, we had over 100 applications for each program, and it was very tough to get down to the final 6. You know, they went through a competitive process. Last year, we worked with over 110 businesses and over 400 volunteers to deliver our programs. But the interesting fact about the foundation is that we only have 4 partnerships. So they are with Taylor Bennett, who are our founders. I mentioned them earlier on. And then we have currently 3 strategic partners. So that's Brunswick, who we have been working with for 12 years. They are our founding agency. Finsbury, who we've been working with for 7 years, and FTI Consulting for 4 years. And we will be announcing our first corporate partner for next year very soon, which we're very excited about that. I wasn't really aware of the foundation before I joined. My previous experiences had given me very little exposure to the industry. So in terms of what drew me to the foundation, I have to say, when I saw this question on my list, I went back to my TBF application, which I kept because I'm nostalgic like that. And I'm really glad I did, because it has actually been a roller coaster of a journey from 2018 to this point. Obviously, I'm still smiling, so, you know, it's not been all bad. But reading my application, it really reminded me of why I applied for this role in the first place. And it's absolutely reinforced my resolve to continue setting out what I want to achieve at the foundation. So I'm going to share the opening line to my sort of first covering letter. It's a little bit cheesy. Don't laugh. Don't cringe. But it was. When I saw the CEO role for the Taylor Bennett Foundation was going to be advertised, I knew I would apply. And that is so true. I remember how excited I was to apply for this opportunity. I remember reading the announcement from my predecessor to say that she was leaving roughly 2 or 3 months before the vacancy was live. And I was really drawn in by what she wrote about the industry lacking in diversity, and also what she wrote about the foundation. And I could see so much potential, and I knew in my heart that I could make it work. And I genuinely, as I said, felt excited about applying for the role and preparing for the interview process, which included an application, a telephone interview with the chair of trustees, a follow-up with the vice chair, and then a 6-panel interview with a presentation. And again, I'm smiling because generally I would really shy away from interview processes like that with so many layers. I am an introvert, believe it or not. Some people think that I'm not. I suffer with, imposter syndrome. And so I could have easily ruled myself out of something like that. But I've come a long way, and, particularly after a short course of executive coaching, things are a lot better. And in fact, it was the executive coaching that was a catalyst for me to make the move. And I knew that when I applied, it was the right time to apply to an organisation that I felt was aligned to my skills, experience and ethos. And I thought it was important to mention that because, as I said before, I worked at my previous charity for 17 years, and there's always the question, what made you leave after so long? Like, what was it? But it was essentially the executive coaching or a kick up the butt for me. So, I do know who I am. I like to think I know who I am, and I kind of only want to work somewhere that aligns with my values, which are very much centered around equity, justice, and fairness. Now, I also want to say that I didn't come along with the illusion that everything was going to be perfect at the foundation. I knew that there would be challenges in this role. Before applying for the vacancy, I did a lot of research into diversity in PR. I knew there was a distinct lack of it. The previous CEO had written a number of blog posts about the challenges that she had faced in the role, and the CIPR and the PRCA's annual censuses were not really encouraging to read. So I had a good picture, not naive. But that didn't deter me. And as I said, I decided to focus on what was good. I applied for the role, I got it, I joined the foundation knowing that essentially they had really good programs that were effective and had the potential to be even better and to grow. I knew that they had a brilliant network of existing supporters, and that is still the case to date. I knew that our alumni were engaged in our work. They were volunteering for the foundation and introducing us to companies, representing us at events. And that was really important because we are such a tiny team. When I secured the role, one of the first things I wanted to do was to speak to our stakeholders to find out what worked and what didn't. I knew that employers paid to take part in our programs, and I needed to know if they were getting a good return on their investment. And for many it was a yes, and for a few it was a no. And I had to, one of the first things was work out an appropriate plan of action. So after my sort of little fact-finding mission, there was only one program that I wanted to pause, and that was our mentoring program. I felt it needed more effort to be put into it, and we needed to support mentors and mentees more effectively throughout the program. So that's what I did. I put on my program development hat on, and the team and I worked towards building a better program, and that's what we have done. And the result today is that we have an oversubscribed program, and next year we will see the introduction of company branded PR mentoring programs, which is again a really exciting thing to share. We'll hopefully make an announcement in the next week or so about one of those partnerships, and the other at the beginning of next year. So to wrap up the first part of this session, the highlights for me have been being able to deliver all of our 3 PR training programs, with the last 2 being delivered 100% in a virtual format. I know when we first thought about it, there was a lot of, gosh, how are we going to do this? Because, building relationships is key amongst the trainees, and, they need to go out to agencies and in-house comms teams to really, get a feel of who those companies are, and, try and get a feel of the sort of culture of the organisation. It's not necessarily ideal, but it definitely has worked. And even with the Brunswick programme that has just finished, out of the 9 trainees that were taken on through the training program, 4 have been offered a job and the others are all interviewing. So we know it works. It is a success. I mentioned earlier on, we've been able to deliver the PR training program in a virtual format, and most impressively, actually, our internship program has been able to continue. So we didn't get the 60 internships that we were planning for the year. We had 16, but they were 100% virtual and was really driven by a few employers in our network. And I am really grateful for that because, as I mentioned earlier on, we had over 200 applications. So it was important to offer those young people something. The final thing sort of highlight is we had an increase in donations this year from agencies and individuals, and that was very positive. But one of the reasons why we had an increase in donations is because some of the lowlights that we had. So, you know, the global pandemic, COVID-19 and lockdown meant that I was put on furlough for a month and a program manager was put on furlough for 2 months. It was a little bit dramatic, but it was what was needed at the time to help preserve the charity. The killing of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement brought up conversations of racism, and in particular my timeline was flooded with negative stories about racism within PR, and my inbox saw an increase from our alumni wanting to share their experiences. And this actually prompted me to host a listening event. We did this obviously virtually, and we just listened to our alumni, myself, my chair of trustees, and another trustee. Some of the alumni shared good stories about how their organisations were supporting them, and some shared not so positive stories, which made me very sad. And whilst I was working hard with the team to deliver our programmes in these really crazy, challenging and uncertain times, I also had employers wanting to pick my brains for free, which made me a little cross. So we are on the other side now. I am not complacent because I know that we are going through a second peak of sorts, and we shall see how this affects us and our employers. But along with my trustees, I have a close eye on things. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That was so interesting. And firstly, amazing work for pulling off internship programs while we're in a global pandemic. Like, I think that's a real kudos to kind of you and your team, is how fantastic that is, and the amount of interest that you're still getting and the number of applications. It's really, it's quite a positive story to hear, actually, to know that like you said, the talent is out there. It's not because there's not a supply. So really fantastic.
And I do want to say as well, a huge thanks to the employers that offered those 16 internships, because it really was driven by them. We were nearly tempted to just write off the program because we just didn't know how it would work. But there were some employers that had already been onboarding people. They had, you know, sort of delivered in things virtually, and they just said, you know what, we can do this. So we're going to try. So also on their side, it was huge. And also we know that there have been hires from some of the virtual internships this year. So again, we're in the process of writing some case studies. So we'll share them because we don't know whether we're going to be in a similar position next year. But what we want our employer network in particular to know is that with the right sort of steps and actions and things put in place, they can offer a good virtual experience and they can still hire from that. So yeah,
that's fantastic. It's a real like good news story out of 2020, which are a few and far between at the moment. So, so have a quick look at the poll, which has been open. So we've asked our audience, have you ever felt discriminated against in the workplace? Results are in, and they are 75% have said yes, 13% saying no, and then 13% saying they're not sure. Are you surprised by those results, or sadly not surprised? Or
I think it's fairly fair, dependent on, you know, who you are, your background, your experiences. I mean, ultimately, it's pretty reflective. It's probably surprising that there isn't sort of more around discrimination, and I'm not just talking about, you know, race and ethnicity. There are, you know, many other protected characteristics that people will face discrimination over gender, sexuality, etc. So I think it's probably quite reflective of what
it's always the bit that always makes me kind of not lose heart even more, but when you see people saying they're not sure, and it's like, oh gosh, like if you're not sure, you probably have felt discrimination. Then if there's something that's kind of sitting in your gut that something's not been right about something, and it's kind of just bringing that awareness as well to people. So before I go into the audience for questions, I've got some of my own. So what skills and learnings did you take to the Taylor Bennett Foundation from your time working with the social mobility charity?
So I think I very much came with a background of leadership, strategy, program development, and they have been very useful in my time so far at the foundation. I think what also made me different to my predecessors is my actual charity background. So, you know, coming with the knowledge of systems, processes, policies, financial management, we now have a proper funding model which will ensure better sustainability and stability for the foundation, which was, you know, a little bit patchy. Volunteer management was also key in helping to move things forward. So I mentioned we worked with 400 volunteers last year, and that is very impressive because we are only a team of 2 full-time staff members and a couple of freelancers. And then I guess ultimately, I think I also bring my lived experience. So I'm a Black woman working in a sector that is actually even less diverse. The charity sector as a whole does not reflect racial diversity of the individuals and communities it serves. Only 9% of the voluntary sector is from a BAME background. Only 6% of CEOs are from a BAME background, and I think if you're a woman, a Black woman, it's even less. I want to say it was 3%, but I couldn't quite find anything to back that up. But it's all of those things, I think.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting how you're saying kind of like all the I guess like the practical knowledge of like this is how a charity works, and then with you saying that when you joined, one of the things that you chose to pause was the mentorship program. It's like, I wonder, like, it must have been your background that was like, hang on, I can look at this and I can see what's working and what's not, and kind of which bits do I need to kind of fix first. So yeah, like they definitely obviously saw the right person with you. And I think your opening sentence, I didn't think it was cheesy at all actually in your application. I thought it was quite powerful to say, I saw this and I had to apply. So, you know, I think it's quite empowering to hear that. So you kind of answered this, but hopefully we're going to see a rise. But like, have you seen more inclusivity in the PR industry since you joined the Taylor Bennett Foundation?
I have, but I've only been here, you know, as I said, nearly a couple of years. And I think 2020 has been an exceptional year with all of the events and movements bringing D&I to the attention of the world. But for me, next year, will the industry still be working so hard to be inclusive? I hope so, because actually there is still so much work to be done. And I'm going to give you an example of this. An alumni of ours, they recently interviewed with an agency, not through the foundation, although that agency does work with us. And the first 3 questions to this young lady by the associate partner was, how do you pronounce your name? These were literally the first questions. I don't think anything's necessarily wrong with the first question, because sometimes I will ask that because I want to be, you know, certain that I'm saying someone's name correctly. But it was, how do you pronounce your name? What is the meaning of your name? And were you born in this country? She then had 2 more interviews with 2 associate partners and then the CEO. And there were some equally peculiar questions and observations they discussed with her, which I won't share, but it was enough to put her off the agency. She was actually offered the role and she turned them down. But for me, you know, her name, the meaning of it, whether she was born in the UK, should not be the opening questions in 2020 for an interview. And this literally happened about 3 weeks ago. So there is still a lot to be done around you know, inclusivity and what's, you know, the sort of right or wrong answers.
It's really disappointing. It's quite gobsmacking to think that literally weeks ago what's the meaning of your name? Ridiculous.
And were you born in this country?
Yeah.
What does that have to do?
Yeah.
And also, you've had a CV, you've had an application. You know, if I always say to people, you don't have to put things like your date of birth on your CV, because people can work out from your education, you know, how old you are roughly, you know, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I just feel those questions to be the opening.
Yeah.
It's not great.
Yeah, I hope she felt really good saying no thanks, but no thanks to that agency.
I thought she was really good the way she actually handled it.
Yeah.
And she wrote a really good sort of email that I had a little look at, and I was really proud of her. And it was led by her. You know, I was there internally outraged, and but she led on it, and I think she handled it well.
That's fantastic. So obviously Taylor Bennett Foundation do such an amazing job of getting more BAME individuals into PR. Unfortunately, obviously, let's not go to that agency. But do you have a particular success story which you're especially proud of, or success stories?
I mean, in general, I'm proud of the successes of the training program, because as I said to you, people who go through that do end up working in the industry. It's fantastic. We have a trustee who was part of the training program in several years ago. I want to say 2014. I could be wrong though, so I do apologize if he's listening. But he was obviously part of the program, has been working his way through the industry, and as I said, he's now a trustee of the foundation. And actually, we just announced this week that he's now the vice chair, so that's really lovely. And then I also wanted to share an email that I received this week from one of the interns on the Summer Stars program this year. And essentially she said that the internship had done so much for her, not just on a professional level, but a personal level too. And she was so thankful for the foundation for facilitating the opportunity. Now, admittedly, I am being a bit vague because the email was private, and she shared some things around some adversity that she had faced. But when I read that email, again, and you call me a sentimental person, but when I read that email, it really made me so proud of the work that we do and the impact that we have on the people that take part. If you come from a disadvantaged background and you do not know people who work in the industry, and you have the desire as an individual and the motivation and the aspiration to work, as I said, in an industry that doesn't appear to have people like you working there, it's really powerful. And that's what she shared with me. She said it was invaluable, that sort of money and class couldn't buy. And I, as I said, I work really hard. Like, there are days I work long hours, and sometimes you think, gosh, it is really hard. But when you read stories like that, and there is hope from people who are, as I said, in the minority, it's just lovely. It really is.
I think, well, that's given me goosebumps. So it's definitely done the job. I think you're right. I can't imagine how hard your job must be at times. And you're just like, oh God, can I do another day? Like, this is tough. But then you're right. Like, it's sometimes just getting that email or saying like, thank you. Like, without the Taylor Bennett Foundation, I wouldn't be doing this. So I think it's really, really lovely. I don't think it's sentimental at all. I think it's wonderful. My last question, did you ever fancy a career in PR yourself?
I want to make sure I don't offend anyone. No, not directly. That's my answer, because being a charity CEO is really hard work. I think regardless of whatever sector you work in, it's tough, but it is rewarding. And, I mentioned earlier on that I'm really driven by purpose, and actually someone once described me as cause driven, and it's very true. So working in the charity space to combat inequalities is absolutely my thing. You heard my journey to this point. I've not deviated from that path, although I did want to say that I think the only thing that could make me change careers is being an artist of sorts. So I make jewellery and I enjoy painting. And if I could genuinely make a viable living out of that, then I would. Yeah, so that's
Love
what
it.
more of a creative at heart.
That's it. That's quite interesting, like the kind of balance of kind of the logic mind of kind of running a charity with the creativity. I think it's a nice, like, kind of the escapism of creativity that gives.
Do you know what? It really, really is. And particularly with painting, I enjoy sort of mixed media painting and you know, very organic pieces, but it's really nice to not have to focus on, for example, something like, you know, fine art, fine painting. You can literally just let your mediums do whatever they want and then come up with something beautiful. And I'm particularly finding that with inks at the moment.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it's really good. It's definitely my escape.
So we have had some questions in from the audience, so I'm just going to start from the top and work down.
Sure.
What do you see as the biggest challenges Taylor Bennett Foundation mentees will be facing in their careers during the rest of 2020 and beyond?
I mean, jobs are really a worry at the moment. I mean, it is for everyone. You know, there's all sorts of talks about how the economy is going to be, you know, wholly affected, and jobs. We at the moment have definitely seen that companies are still hiring. You know, we have a jobs board on our website and, you know, it's quite full, and companies are still looking for talent because as well, I guess ultimately business has to go on. But I equally know there is a pause, and I think, you know, my advice to young people is in some way, shape or form to keep themselves connected, whether that's through going through mentoring, doing more training, doing something, learning a new language, so that when things bounce back, which it will, they can, you know, sort of say, these are the things that I have been doing, and actually these are the additional skills I can now bring to you. But things will bounce back. It's just a matter of time. But it's tough. It is going to get tough.
I think it's a really, really good point and a good shout out to make that I think we can probably all do, is just kind of keep on educating yourself, keep on topping up those skills so that kind of you're kind of prepared all the time. And yeah, it's the unknown really, isn't it? So fingers crossed for.
But you have to keep positive.
Yeah, positive. Absolutely. So what kind of mentors are the Taylor Bennett Foundation looking for in the future?
Ooh. So 2 types. We have our standard mentoring program, and we look for people all levels, all backgrounds. You know, you could be an account manager, account exec, all the way up to CEO, partner, director level. But we are also just about to, well, I say just about, in the next few months, announce an accelerator program. And this is one of our solutions to, you know, trying to solve the sort of retention and progression issue for our alumni. So it's a 12-month accelerator program, which will require mentors who are at the most, I guess, senior level, partner, director, CEO, and they will mentor our high potential alumni who have maybe been working, you know, 3, 4, 5 years, and they are ready for the next step. And we're going to sort of offer some wraparound support, some executive coaching, and some various other sessions. So those are the 2 ways that you can get involved with the mentoring programs. As I said, the advanced one, the accelerator program, will launch in January. But just generally, as I said, you can be any background, any level. You can even work in HR. It just depends, the digital space. What we really want is our mentors to be on board with our vision and mission, to understand, you know, that you are going to have a young person who's from a BA&E background, maybe disadvantaged, and they are really looking to either find out about the industry or progress in the industry. And if you can offer advice and guidance and support, then that's it. And we provide advice as well. We don't just sort of presume that people will have the skills to be a mentor. We do briefing sessions, and we provide a briefing pack. We're very clear about, you know, our expectations and the mentees as well.
Well, let's hope we've got a few future mentors on the session today. It'd be exciting to kind of give that inspiration. I think what you said about kind of you've just got to be on board with what we're doing and kind of have that drive, have that passion, and just give that support to those people that, and kind of hopefully help them, guide them into a positive career in PR.
Yeah,
Fingers
exactly.
crossed. So the last question I've got, which kind of times really nicely actually, lovely. So they've said, what advice would you give to people returning from furlough now or getting back to work, reintegrating with teams? So I think as well this kind of ties into maybe those past interns that have gone into kind of like new positions, like that re-entry. It's almost like a re-entering a job for quite a few people, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think dependent on how long you've been on furlough for, it may be slightly, it's interesting. I feel like it might be slightly harder because obviously I experienced that, I was on furlough for a month, and actually in the beginning in particular as well, I found it really hard because obviously I was also the CEO of the foundation and I wanted to do things. And so by the time I was kind of warming up to being on furlough and thinking, okay, I will read that book, or I will learn that new skill, I will paint, and it was time for me to go back. But there was so much for me to do. For me personally, I actually just got straight into it, and it was like I hadn't been away. I know with my program manager who'd been away for 8 weeks, again, actually, because she had been away for so long, she just kind of got into it. There was so much to do when she returned, and I guess dependent on your company and what you do when you return, you might actually just find it's not as daunting as you might think it is. But for me, it's also up to leadership to, if you do feel a bit sort of out of touch, it's up to leadership to reintegrate you into things and to make sure, not quite that you're inducted, but to bring you up to speed fully on all of the things that you have missed out on. And I guess actually, if leadership are not taking that leadership role, then that's for you to say, right, what did I miss? What are the key things? I guess what are the things that I need to know? And yes, leave out the things that I don't need to know, because if they've passed and there's no impact to you, then that's it. But yeah, I just think dependent on your situation, it could be a little bit of support you need or a lot. And I think whatever it is, particularly actually if it's a lot of support you need, then find it. Ask someone. Everyone has a manager or as I said, leadership.
Yeah, that's it. That's a good advice, I think. And I think as we reach the end of October, it's probably going to be quite a lot of people facing that kind of challenge coming up. So we have had one last question come in. I didn't know about this one, so it wasn't a trick. So can you give a few examples of the actions that you would expect companies to take to tackle inequality issues? And do you think a lack of understanding / conflating of issues such as inequality and inequity is stifling progress for marginalised groups?
So the latter part of the question, I would say yes. It is stifling progress, and I would 100% encourage people to, educate themselves around the issues that sometimes, I'm going to say people from various protected characteristics are going through. There are lots of books and resources online around, racial inequality and the things that people face, microaggressions, being blocked from career progression. So that there is lots that you can, as I said, read around that. There is training that people can take part in. But what I will say is I'm not a fan of one-off training, unconscious bias. I'm not a huge believer in it. I know it can play a part in improving certain things, but I think companies need to be a bit more holistic in their D&I efforts. And I know sometimes people don't have the financial resources to maybe have a dedicated person or a team or just, money to do this stuff, but it doesn't always require money. It just requires effort. and engage with organisations, not just like the foundation. There is an organisation called Creative Equals, and as I said, there are some independent people doing good work in the PR space to support companies. So
I think you really kind of hit the nail on the head there, and said, like, with the words holistic and it requires effort. Just kind of it can feel like it's a lot of hard work, and it kind of should feel like it's a lot of hard work, because there's not a quick fix, like 6-hour training course that everybody can go on and, hey presto, the issue's fixed. If it was that simple, we'd have done it by now, but it's not. So yeah, I think that's a really good kind of like takeaways, actually. So we are at the end of the time, I'm afraid. Thank you so much for being such a fantastic guest. I found it massively interesting. I can see like a couple of comments saying it's really interesting as well, and really insightful. So thank you once again, Melissa.
No, thank you for inviting me.
And thank you to everybody that joined us as well, and for your questions. And take care, everybody, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.